Welcome to the Geek 101 podcast, episode 246. Should you watch Scrubs? Where do you think we are? I'm Ariel Rada.
And I'm crying.
And we are here to talk about one of our favorite shows. I'm crying, of course, is of course, Andy. Andy and I here are here to talk about one of our favorite shows. That is Scrubs, created by Bill Lawrence and starring such notable figures as Zach Braff and Donald Faison. But before that, we have news. And Andy, why don't you lay on us the news? Black
Widow has been delayed.
Yeah, indefinitely is what Disney gave us. This is not a surprise. Do you remember what the original release date for Black Widow was?
Wasn't it like May 1st? Or May 10th?
I think it was May. Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely the first weekend of May. That's like Disney's weekend.
Yeah, so it's not a surprise, and I think their delaying of it might help the last vestige of people who have not taken this seriously realize that this is very serious. That Disney does not believe that, society will be back to its normal functioning level by May. For example, I am scheduled to go physically back to work, by the end of April, the last week of April, and I do not think that that's going to happen.
Yeah. Personally, I'm thinking that it's going to be better by around Memorial Day, but it's also going to come back even worse in October.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. We won't get into any of that stuff.
It's too depressing. Let's talk about Scrubs.
Yeah. So some other piece of news that was pretty exciting, particularly for fans of Star Wars and fans of Star Wars adjacent and related things. Rosario Dawson has been cast as Ahsoka Tano. Andy, did you watch the Clone Wars and see the story of Ahsoka Tano?
I saw the first few seasons, so I am familiar with Ahsoka, and this made me really, really happy. It's one of those things where, like, I wish I didn't know, because it'd be really cool to just throw The Mandalorian up and then see it. But the internet would not let that happen, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, Ahsoka Tano in the Clone Wars TV series is the young Padawan that was assigned to Anakin Skywalker. This is a big deal because we previously did not know, previous to this Clone Wars series that came out in the 2000s, we did not know that Anakin had a Padawan, right? We don't see that in the films at all. This is something that was retconned in a television show and, of course, has been transitioned into being quote-unquote canon for the upcoming films. Ahsoka Tano is one of the young Jedi who kind of catches on that the Jedi are corrupt, but probably handles it in a much better way than Anakin did.
What are you talking about? Anakin handled it perfectly fine.
She completely understands who Anakin is from every angle. And probably is the person who knows him best besides, like, his wife, besides Padme.
Right.
And so I'm interested. Go on.
She had a voice cameo in Rise of Skywalker.
Yes, which I have yet to watch. But many people have called for and tweeted and suggested that Rosario Dawson be a live action version of an adult Ahsoka Tano. And they're getting their wish now with this character in The Mandalorian.
Yeah. This is great. Also, it's fascinating to me that we might finally have a non-human character, like main character
in
Star Wars. Like, in like anything Star Wars, really. That's not like a video game.
The closest you get is Chewbacca.
Right. And Chewbacca is barely a main character. I mean, he's beloved.
I mean, Yoda is also pretty big. He's pretty high up there.
Yeah.
His dialogue. But I get what you mean, yeah.
Yeah. So maybe we're finally leaving human supremacy away.
Sure, perhaps. It is probably a tall ask to get them to either like wear the capture suit or put on the makeup every day, and that's probably why you don't see too many non-human Jedi and Jedi characters or Star Wars characters play very prominent roles. But that's all the news we have for today. Not a ton of news is coming out. I guess one here, Diamond Distributors, who is the comic book production and distribution company, or one of them, pretty much one, like the big one, has suspended its distribution and production of comic books indefinitely. So your local comic shop will not be getting new incoming comics. Of course, please support your shops locally and buy things like graphic novels and stuff like that, because it is important to help those businesses in this very trying time.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably a good thing that a distributor is, shut down production. Like, this all needs to be taken seriously, and that's a great thing. It would be really weird though if like DC or Marvel did the same thing. And there's also another casting in the Mandalorian, Ariel, that just came out.
What is that?
Michael Biehn has been cast. I'm looking him up right now. I'm pretty certain that he was in Aliens. Yeah, Hicks from Aliens. Okay. He's playing a bounty hunter from the Mando's past.
Right. That's less exciting than the Ahsoka Tano news.
Yeah. It's probably just going to be a one-off character, like every other major, amazing casting stunt from The Mandalorian. Yeah.
All right, let's move on to our main topic today, where we are going to talk. We're going to talk about one of our favorite shows, one of the best sitcoms that has been on television, Scrubs. Andy, what is your experience with Scrubs?
Okay, well, Scrubs was like one of the first TV series that, I remember every summer renting the DVDs from Blockbuster, one at a time, because back then, seasons of shows cost like $70 at Circuit City. And just, whenever they came out, just renting each disc separately and plowing through all the special features and the commentaries, and really kind of starting to understand comedy through Scrubs and through Bill Lawrence's commentary. So I have very positive, very, very positive feelings from Scrubs at about 2003 on.
All right, I had a friend, shout out to my friend Pierre, who, we would always talk about watching How I Met Your Mother or watching Scrubs or watching not Scrubs, watching How I Met Your Mother or Friends or The Office, and he would always be like, "Man, Scrubs is the best one," and he'd be like, "Yeah, okay." And then one day it ends up on Netflix, and it's not there currently; it's on Hulu right now. But one day it ends up on Netflix, and so my cousin and I and a bunch of friends were like, "Oh, we'll finally watch it." And then we came out of it just being like, "Man, that was great." And we all just and then we went back to him, and he did the whole song and dance, the "I Told You So" and stuff like that.
Which by the way, if you ever recommend something to somebody, they don't do it, and then they do eventually decide to consume that content, make sure to do the "I Told You So."
Yes, totally agree. It's a really great show. It is certainly my favorite of all of the sitcom shows, and it's definitely my favorite of the profession-based sitcom shows, and we'll get into some of those in a little bit. Andy, what is your number one? What is your number one? Oh, first of all, okay, let me do this real quick. What is Scrubs?
Scrubs is a point of view based comedy, workplace sitcom comedy about a hospital and a tight knit group of doctors who work at this teaching hospital. And there's a fascinating balance of hijinks and medical accuracy, but also tragedy within the story of Scrubs.
Yeah, so Scrubs is like you said, a comedy-based point of view by this character named JD. He's a young doctor. This was surprising to me and to many people. Slate.com had an article back in 2009, where they asked doctors and they asked medical professionals and they interviewed people. This piece written by Joanna Weiss, and I will tweet it out after we release this episode. Scrubs, goofy, cartoonish, and the most accurate portrayal of the medical profession on TV. And basically, the article goes in depth on how Scrubs is just like this goofy show where Zach Braff's character JD has daydreams and he wants the approval of his mentor, and he, has loves his best friend, who everyone calls Black Doctor sometimes, and but in reality, what the show is really about, it's about how these doctors and nurses and and janitors even, like how they get through the day-to-day of the hospital. And it's such a contrast to shows like Grey's Anatomy or ER or House, because those are all about like the big crazy things that happen in the hospital. And Scrubs has maybe one of those a season, right, Andy?
Yeah. It's very much more routine, dealing with specific types of characters and dealing with specific types of patients. And it's usually very minor, which is where a lot of the humor can come from. But then that's also where a lot of the unexpected drama can come from too.
Yeah. And it is important that, that the medical professionals see that it's not, it's not House figuring out a case that nobody figures out, and he's a specialist and he's the only guy in the world who can do this. And it's just about these 4, 5, 6 characters who are in a hospital that is, besides JD's ridiculous daydreams and witty banter, right? It's exactly what the day-to-day is like. Worried about, messing up or struggling to be on call or not getting enough sleep, and doctors not making enough money, like making as much money as you think they do. All these things are addressed in Scrubs, and they're addressed often, and they're addressed in very smart and poignant ways when the situation calls for it. So, if you are a medical professional and who wants to see things done or wants a show that gets the little things right, maybe check out Scrubs. Annie, what would be a TV show that people like that is complete and utter like nonsense?
What do you mean by
field?
In a certain field? Anything dealing with like NCIS or just like computer technologies in these like serialized villain of the week, take down a criminal type thing.
Yeah,
like anything.
What comes to mind is that scene in Criminal Minds where there's like two people like are like
hacking,
defending a hack, and they pull up a second keyboard so that they can defend the hack twice, like with twice the efficiency. It's complete and utter nonsense. For me, it's anything with like court procedurals. As somebody who like took government classes and has a criminal justice degree, where it's just like, man, this is not how the law works. This is not how lawyers work. This is not how like real life works. And some of the stuff is utter nonsense.
Daredevil.
Oh, dude, Daredevil season 2 is bad. It's so bad. And season 1 is like they barely address it, which makes it so much better, right? Like they're just like, yeah, we have to do a lot of contracts and we have to do like, talk to potential clients, and that's not really all they do. They don't try to get into the trial and stuff like that, because it's hard. It's hard to make it seem like real. Okay, so let's get into like what's the thing you like most about Scrubs?
Well, besides, I mean, it's very well documented that I love a good emotional gut punch, and Scrubs is full of that. I really like the relationship between the two main male characters, JD and Turk. And Ariel, I kind of talked to you a little bit about this off air, but they have a very specific relationship that is completely heterosexual, but very open with their feelings and with showing each other that they care about each other. And especially in the early aughts on network TV, I had never really seen adults act this way. Right? Like that is the latent homophobia that would normally be between two adult men on network TV for showing any kind of emotion or fondness for each other. That doesn't exist here, and it allows the two characters to interact and be open about their feelings in such a way that's just very refreshing and kind of shows you how an adult heterosexual male friendship should be.
Yeah, I think it has a very positive portrayal between JD and Turk. I think it's the defining relationship of the show, despite the fact that JD has a string of relationships and Turk ends up with somebody else from the show, and there are other characters and other things that happen, but that's what makes the show work.
Well, I mean, Guy Love is one of the most famous YouTube viral sensations, right?
Yeah, yeah. The producer Bill Lawrence has done a couple of other shows that you've heard of, probably. Cougar Town with Courtney Cox. He's done. He did Spin City for a few years before Scrubs, and ran a little concurrently. So he's had success and hasn't had much success since Scrub ended. Or actually, no, Cougar Town was good, but since then, not so much. The thing that I love most about Scrubs, or one of the things that I really love about Scrubs, right? It's how timeless it is. And I figured it out. And I figured out why it seems so timeless compared to something like Friends, which seems very stuck in the 90s and early 2000s. It's that the defining things that make a show or a movie seem dated are, one is cell phones, which Scrubs largely avoids, because when you see the beeper, right, these medical personnel are beeped, it's never like, oh yeah, here's my pager number, let's hang out. It's, you need to page me to get this, to save someone's life, or blah blah blah, or get this medication, whatever. And besides the cell phones and stuff, two would be clothes. And I think clothes and style very much dictate how a show feels. And in Scrubs, everyone, Andy, is wearing
suits.
Suits, yes, everyone's wearing Scrubs, and so as long as the comedy still hits, and it does, because a lot of it is like physical comedy that doesn't truly, that doesn't really truly go out of style, right? It always swings back around. It seems pretty timeless to me, and it also helps that, like, between season 1 and season 8, right? It only ran for 8 seasons, not 9.
Nope, not 9.
The characters, there's only one character that looks markedly different from the beginning to the end, and that is Dr. Elliot Reed, who's played by someone whose name escapes me right now.
Sarah Chalk. You might recognize her as the mother from Rick and Morty.
Oh my God, that's her? Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
She also plays a doctor, a dermatologist in How I Met Your Mother. I'm just saying what's it. So she's the only character who looks very different.
That's the name, Beth.
Yeah, Beth, the mother from Rick and Morty. So I think the timeless quality really helps it seem just inherently rewatchable.
Right. Which, by the way, Ariel, is kind of insane because a lot of the humor is very early aughts humor in its editing style, because it does the Family Guy cut to something and then just cut back really quickly.
Yeah, his daydreams, right?
Right. And they are framed that way, and they are daydreams, but they really work in a weird, timeless manner. Like I think Family Guy is very dated in a lot of those things, but with this, the cutting to his fantasies or his daydreams or whatever, it works because they have a logical connection to who he is as a person.
Right, and they reference it at several points later in the show where it's just like he's daydreaming again. You can't, like, he's always gone already. He's like, too late, I'm already gone. It's funny, and it's his defining trait, right? Besides, we'll get into something a little later. What else is something about Scrubs that you find makes it special?
Well, it's the entire premise of it being from the point of view of JD's character. They are able to do a lot with narrative and mess around with narrative quite a bit that you really wouldn't expect. So almost every episode is titled My Blank, and it opens up with JD doing a kind of a monologue and kind of discussing things. And they really stick with that theme throughout the entire series. A lot of other series will like have that kind of, be a starting point, but then just kind of leave it. But they really allow the inner monologue of JD to roam free. They allow him to fantasize about things, to really stress his anxieties or his thought processes without ever saying things to people that don't make sense and aren't like how people actually talk. But once a season, they have a special kind of episode called that's usually like his story or her story or something like that, where they do the entire thing from the perspective of another character. And those are always very special episodes because you get to hear the other character. You get to interact with them in a way that you weren't able to before.
Yeah, I really like the character. I really like JD. And I think what makes him so different, I think, from some other, maybe not, but something that I think helps the show in the long term is that he, besides the daydreaming and besides like little quirks here and there, he acts very much like a normal person growing in his mid-20s acts, where he doesn't always say the right thing. He doesn't always get what he wants. He's a little down on his luck, and sometimes he has victories and sometimes he has defeats, but he's truly a flawed person, and everyone in that show is a flawed person, and they're all flawed and they're all dimensional. If you look at something like Friends, Friends and How I Met Your Mother, all of those characters turned into caricatures of themselves by the end of the series. And Scrubs did the inverse. They actually, at no point do any of them seem, after, let's say, a season and a half, they all have levels, they're all three-dimensional, and they all grow. And I just don't know, some longer than others. Someone like the janitor or the chief of medicine.
First of all, he's Dr. Yan Itor.
Yan Itor, or Gen Mafu. It doesn't always work, and in the show we'll mention again a little later, like Psych. There's so much more growth in these characters than there are in shows like the ones we mentioned just now.
Right, and I think, back to my point about it being Zach Braff's narration, I actually think that that's like where a lot of that can come from, is because one, we get to hear JD's actual inner dialogue without him just, saying to Turk all his logic for things, which, if you ever try to explain your logic to people, like there's a certain amount of things that you're assuming or thinking in certain ways that are incredibly foreign to other people. And that allows JD to have this kind of thought process.
Yeah.
It allows him to deal with things.
You ever just like have someone say something and your brain takes like 7, 8, 9 steps, and then your next sentence makes absolutely no sense to them?
Ariel, have you been listening to any episodes of the podcast that I'm on?
You never have that struggle in Scrubs. It's something that kind of plagues comic book shows and comic book movies, where they're struggling to adapt certain things that happen, very complex ways of telling stories. They're trying to adapt things one-to-one from page to screen, but it's just the way the medium works, it just does not allow you to do those things. And so as a result, you have very simplified or very different variations of famous stories going from comic book page to comic book movie. And Scrubs, Scrubs does in fact have that inner monologue. It does have the character, speak his mind. It does help. I especially appreciate when you want JD to say yes to something. And in his head, he goes, "Oh, I should say yes because this, and this." And ultimately, he'll say no. And that's a very human thing that happens. And I think everybody in their life has experienced that at one time or another. And you appreciate it, where he's, at the end when he says no, or when he insults somebody, or when he, doesn't give someone support, he sits there and he's just like, I always do this to myself. And it's a very relatable thing. It's a very relatable show.
Yeah. And then, you have another character who, Dr. Cox, played beautifully by John McGinley, who is a foil to JD. And you understand his internal, you understand Zach Braff or JD's internal discussions with him and his fears, and it really allows the humor and the character development to form more naturally, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Dr. Cox's character is excellent in that he's very much a caricature early, him and the chief of medicine, Dr. Kelso. But by the end of the season, he is largely unrecognizable from who he was from season 1 to season 8.
Yeah.
I don't know how true that is in most shows.
Right. And with like Dr. Kelso, there's an episode where his old like best friend and kind of a mentor doctor comes back, and Dr. Kelso, who's basically just like a grumpy old doctor who's all about the profit and pretty mean most of the time, his reaction to finding out that his old friend who is not keeping up with medical techniques,
played by Dick Van Dyke.
Yeah. It's such a heartbreaking moment where you really understand him a lot better, I think.
Yeah. I also so let's get into that. What is your favorite cameo or guest appearance in Scrubs?
Oh,
if you have one off the top of your head. I have one in my head. Elizabeth
Banks for me.
Oh, okay, yeah. So Elizabeth Banks plays a love interest of JD in the later seasons. We'll just leave it at that. Their storyline is excellent, I think, and very real life in a way.
What about you? Is it a basketball player?
No, mine is Michael J. Fox.
Oh yeah,
Dr. Kevin Casey. So his character is awesome. You learn kind of everyone learns an important lesson from his character at one point or another. Kind of like what it takes to be a great doctor and stuff like that. So there's just great cameo appearances, and they often take one of those cameos and stuff like that, and they really make it count, which cannot be said for every show. I think
Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, right. That was a great episode. I think most recently you think of a show like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which had Lin-Manuel Miranda, and it was fine, and it was clever, and it was a little goofy, but I don't even remember what happened in that episode. But I will always remember what Michael J. Fox's character, or Dick Van Dyke, or Elizabeth Banks, what they did in Scrubs,
or Brendan Fraser.
Wow, how did neither of us mention him?
Because he's like him and Tom Cavanaugh are like two of the best reoccurring characters. And that's the thing, is they're more reoccurring. They're not really a cameo. Ryan Reynolds was like one episode, right?
Ryan Reynolds was one episode. Michael J. Fox was like 3 or 4. Dick Van Dyke was 1. Yeah, the show is so good. Do you have anything else in regards to what makes the show really special? Why someone should watch it?
There's just such a very unique mix of sitcom sensibilities, but also just every character being important, and kind of like The Simpsons, where a character might come in and might be a minor character, but they'll still keep that consistent, right? There's also this feeling where in one episode it really benefits from a linear watch, which is something that not a lot of sitcoms benefit from.
Yeah,
right?
I agree. Totally.
Everything has to go back to the status quo at the end of the 20 minutes. But with Scrubs, there's so many little things. There's a little line back and forth that'll come back 3 episodes later. There's just little character developments that are important, little bits of information either JD finds out or he starts hiding from people. And that's important, and that's why Scrubs is a good show to binge.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I'm thinking about. It's not just that every episode is this big thing. It's that it's a good simile of life where some things are very, very important and very just quick, and you might not pick up on it your first or second time watching it, but you also might pick up on it later and be like, oh, whoa, he said that thing, and that comes back in like half a season.
Yeah, and I think the aforementioned character growth is so important that if you had watched episode 2 of season 3, and if you had watched episode 5 of season 8, the core personality is still there, but the characters are so different that you could not imagine, or you'd really be curious as to how Dr. Cox ends up the way he is from 1 to 8, or Donald Faison's character, Turk, ends up how he is from season 2 to season 7, whatever. If you watch any episode of How I Met Your Mother, if you watch any episode of Friends, any episode of Supernatural even, the characters are largely uninterrupted in their personality, and you don't truly need to know what happens to Ted. I think Ted and How I Met Your Mother specifically is like Ted and Barney are probably the most egregious examples of this, where as long as Ted is not in a relationship with Robin, and Barney is not in a relationship with Robin in those episodes of How I Met Your Mother, they are unchanged characters. They are mainstays, and it's such a different experience in Scrubs, I think.
Yeah. And it's so weird because there's so many things that happen in Scrubs that you either need to show the video clip with it to like make it funny. Like there's one point where JD wants to get a video on America's Funniest Home Videos, and it just shows him with his girlfriend trying to golf, and his girlfriend's like, I'm tired of doing this. Can't we just go home and but
Yeah.
And JD's like, no, hit me in the nads again with the golf club. And it's explaining that joke took like 3 times longer than the joke actually pops up there. It's a very joke dense series, and it's so hard to talk about it without showing those little things, those little clips, because I just have so many of those like running through my head. And at the same time, there's all these great dramatic moments that I don't want to spoil for people who haven't seen it.
Yeah.
My recommendation for anyone is to watch the first 4 episodes. If you watch the first 4 episodes, you'll have gotten a good idea of the entire span of what the show can be and what it is. And that's my recommendation.
All right. One of the last thing I want to mention before we get into like what is this like is I think it's important that the show is actually pretty diverse in regards to the cast. You have, in terms of white characters, you've got JD, of course, in the lead. who is arguably like the worst person out of everyone there besides Cox, or besides Kelso. You have Dr. Elliot Reed, played by Sarah Chalk. You have Dr. Cox, you have the janitor, and you have Dr. Bob Kelso, as like 5 like white main characters. But you also have the nurse Carla, who is Dominican. You have Donald Faison playing Christopher Turk, who is of course who they call Black Doctor. You have Laverne. You have several characters in the show. You have Todd, who I don't think is you have the Todd who is not white. You have who was Turk's attending? Dr. Wen. You will have many nurses and doctors and orderlies, right? Like like Dr. Hooch, who are people of color, and I think they make a concerted effort to do that. In where shows like Friends and How I Met Your Mother and stuff like that are they just don't make that effort. They just don't, and it's I appreciate Scrubs for that.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I was just laughing because I was thinking of the relationship he has with the competing surgeon.
The beginning,
yeah,
where she's like, "Suck it, Turk,"
while they're like doing heart surgery on somebody.
Bonnie, I think it is.
Yeah. Oh man, that is such a great, just small thing. Yeah. Also, Masi Oka from Scrubs, or not from Heroes, is on Scrubs as well.
Yeah, he's a urologist,
right?
Yeah.
Henry, I think his name is.
I don't remember.
Franklin.
Franklin,
anyway.
Yeah, there's a lot. All right, let's get into watch Scrubs if you like blank. What's your first one, Andy?
All right, my first one is a show called Boston Legal. That's a legal drama by David E. Kelly. Now, Ariel, you might actually really like this because the show itself, David E. Kelly, who did such amazing legal dramas as The Practice, and Boston Legal is actually a spinoff of The Practice, but he was a real lawyer.
Okay.
A lot of this stuff is, especially in Boston Legal, a lot of it is goofy, but it takes in every episode there's an A plot and a B plot, as normal shows are. The B plot is always a goofy lawsuit that goes incredibly, it takes itself very seriously and goes much more dramatic. And the B plot is one that is usually just standard legal drama affair. But this is one of the few shows that exists where two major character actors in it, William Shatner and James Spader, they're some of the only actors who have won Emmys playing the same character in 2 different shows.
Huh. What was the other one? I'm sorry. Besides Boston Legal.
Right. It was Boston Legal and The Practice. And William Shatner and James Spader both came in on the last season of The Practice. And their dynamic was so good and popular and strong that they went ahead and got their own spinoff series. And they won Emmys in both shows, which is really, really, really fascinating. But if you like the dynamic between JD and Turk on Scrubs, or you like the dynamic between Alan Shore and Denny Crane in Boston Legal, this is where you should really take your time to give Boston Legal, it's streaming on Hulu, a shot. Give it a few episodes. It's a bit of a slow start.
Yeah, I think another show that's in the same vein, kind of a comedy drama sitcom based on our profession. I think you have to look at Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which we mentioned earlier. That show in particular is just as diverse, or if not more than Scrubs is. It has a lead character who is fallible, who does make mistakes, and is not completely super relatable. He's not an incredibly handsome man. Of course, speaking of gosh, what's his name? The Lonely Island guy,
Andy Samberg.
Andy Samberg. I was just watching Hot Rod too. You think I'd remember? I think that show is probably one of the closest things to Scrubs. We mentioned this before. If you like The Office, if you like Parks and Rec, if you like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and you want a medical skinned version of those things, I think you would enjoy Scrubs. But to me, and I think to you, Andy, as you've iterated here, this is my favorite of all of those profession-based comedy sitcoms.
Yeah, it definitely takes the profession aspect of it a lot more seriously than the other sitcoms we just talked about, which is important. I think it's important in storytelling, especially when you're dealing with people dying and illnesses and actual evils of the medical industry, as Scrubs does.
Yeah, they get into a lot of that: pharmaceuticals, insurance problems, all that jazz. So I think you have this last one perfectly in regards to Bud Dynamic. Why don't you share this last show?
Okay.
That audiences might like.
All right. This is a show that is streaming on Amazon, and it is called Psych. It is a show I will recommend to anyone and everyone for a beautiful show that you can just put on in the background and enjoy any singular episode of. It is about Sean Spencer, played by James Rhodey, a man who is incredibly attentive and detail-oriented and ends up pretending to be a psychic to help police solve some cases. He's very good, but what makes the show really, really just a standout show, every episode after the first two seasons really starts to be a parody and an homage to other things. There's an episode called Dual Spires that is where they end up in basically Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
There's all these little things. The show is incredibly meta and will reference itself. There's so much, but the real thing here, the real dynamic, the same dynamic that exists between JD and Turk, this beautiful friendship that there's some drama, there's some tension, but it's also just nothing but love and warmth for each other exists between Sean Spencer and his best friend Gus, played by Dule Hill.
Yeah, Dule Hill, who most people I think would know from Holes
or The West Wing.
No, Holes, Andy. I'm just kidding. Yeah. So, fun fact: James Roday, his full name, Andy, is James David Rodriguez, and he is half Mexican.
Awesome.
Yeah, my mind was absolutely blown when I learned that. But yeah, if you want a white lead who has a weird mental tick that people sometimes make fun of in the show, and a bald black best friend, you would like both Psych and Scrubs. I keep thinking of the scene with the episode of Psych with Freddie Prinze Jr. where they make the clue face that he always makes. It's so funny. Yeah, good pull, Andy. Good pull.
Yeah, well, I'm also thinking of their 100th episode was actually a big homage to Clue, the movie.
Yes,
the movie that we
star.
might.
There was a rock star that invites them to a house in Psych.
Yeah, and they even got most of the cast of the movie Clue to be in there. So you have Tim Curry and Christopher Lloyd and just a ton of other people, and they actually had put out two different versions of this episode, because Clue, when it went to theaters in the 80s, actually had three different endings.
Yeah, that's cool. But enough about Psych. This is not a should you watch Psych. This is a should you watch Scrubs. Yeah, I really enjoy Scrubs. I think if you liked any of the shows that we mentioned before, I think it's an easy recommend. You've got plenty of time. It is, of course, streaming on Hulu. But let's wrap this up, Andy. We both agree you should watch Scrubs. What is your homework for this week?
My homework for this week is to watch Scrubs. I came ill prepared for homework this week, Ariel.
Okay. My homework this week, if you do watch Scrubs, or if you have watched Scrubs, my future best friend Shay Serrano has written a book, 10 illustrated essays about Scrubs, titled "Where Do You Think We Are?" That is by Shay Serrano and Arturo Torres. You can just go on Twitter at Shay Serrano and find the link for this. It's a PDF. It's only online. He gives you 100% gives you permission to print it, to teach from it, to do anything, in regards to that PDF. But, I've read his one on The Office called Conference Room 5 Minutes. I have his his other books, Movies and Other Things, and Basketball and Other Things. He's an excellent conversational writer who is hilarious, and he's unashamed of what he loves. So check that out. That's my homework. Where Do You Think We Are? Written by Shay Serrano and illustrated by Arturo Torres. Andy, do we know what we're doing next week yet?
We can do anything, or we can do anything from Onward, the Pixar movie. We can finally continue our quasi-horror spring and do The Color Out of Space with the Nick Cage Lovecraftian horror movie. Ariel, we've got so much we can choose from. So
this is a strange time in our lives. Our kind of movie schedule that we were almost relying upon for a couple of episodes for the next few months is non-existent. So, obviously we do want what's best, and we would not have gone to those movies. I didn't even go watch Bloodshot because of kind of my proximity to big cities like New York and Jersey City and Philadelphia. But
well, Ariel, it is now on VOD, so you can go ahead and watch it.
Sure, yeah. Did you watch Hardcore Henry yet?
No, I should probably watch that.
If you do, if you have time, you have time. But if you do, I really want to know, if I don't get to Bloodshot, I really want to know how similar those two are. Okay. But let's get out of here. Andy, where can people find you online?
You can find me online on Twitter and Letterboxd at Hebrews Pale Ale.
All right, you can find me at Dread Pirate Rada. You can find us at Geek 101 Podcast on Twitter and Facebook and Patreon. Email us geek101pod@gmail.com. That's all we have for today. Class dismissed.